You're on mute. Hi, Brian, just unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay. So, Brian Menza from the Ministry of Energy, Esther Focal Point Person.
Thank you. We can move over to the Off-Grid Task Force. Sabera? You are muted, Sabera.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sabera Khan. I'm one of the focal points for the Off-Grid Task Force, supported by CEDA under Beyond the Grid Fund funding line. I support the ministry with technical assistance and administration to basically manage all the various activities under the Off-Grid Task Force. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabera. We move on to the Zambia Bureau of Standards. We have Belinda. Belinda, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Doreen, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belinda Soko Kanchea. I am the Standards Development and Training Manager, Zambia Bureau of Standards. And currently, Zambia is the Secretariat for the SADC Cooperation in Standardization. And I am actually currently the regional coordinator for that structure.
Thanks, Belinda. I hope at some point we'll get to see you. You'll be able to switch on your video. Then lastly, we have Macmillan from Malawi. Macmillan, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Macmillan Nankonya. I'm the General Manager of FinCorp Savings and Credit Cooperative. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So once again, welcome to our panelists. And to just, let's just remember that if we have any questions for our panelists, you can please put them in the chat. And as we go along, we'll be able to take those questions. Also, to set the ground and tone for this discussion, we will start with the Ministry of Energy. Brian, you had originally started the discussion around the work being done by the ministry in the off-grid space. And what we'd want to know, moving on further, is what exactly is being done, especially with regard to standalone solar. So what is the Ministry of Energy doing in the off-grid space, especially with regard to solar? Brian, would you like to set us off?
Yes, Doreen. I hope you can get me clearly.
We can get you clearly. Would you like me to repeat the question, or you are okay?
Yes, please. Please repeat the question. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, so we are moving on and just building on the conversation you had with Karen. So we'd like to just get more information about what the Ministry of Energy is doing, especially with regard to standalone solar.
Okay, so building up on what I mentioned earlier, on the activities that we are doing in the off-grid space. So the ministry has recognized the need to develop off-grid technologies to improve the access to electricity. And these things are there in our policy interventions and in the development of renewable energy strategies. These are the things that we are looking at to just categorically mention that for us to reach the targets that we are talking about, grid-connected electricity will not really help us much. Though it is important, but it's costly, looking at the way we settle, and also you don't want to run a grid line to a far place only to connect a few people, so the cost will not be justified. But if you can talk about off-grid systems, such as solar home systems, you would connect people quickly and also just satisfy their need for access to electricity and improve their lives. Of course, in the rural areas, people do not have equipment that we have in the town. So, of course, the capacities that we are looking at will be less, but they will satisfy the need for electricity that they have, charging phones and so on. So the government having recognized that, to put that in policies like I've mentioned, and through projects such as ESTAF, we have a lot of activities that we are doing, including the off-grid task force. Madam Sabera has been very active on this. Actually, from the ministry, we benefit so much from her enthusiasm and a push to try to increase, access to electricity in the off-grid space. So the ministry recognizes all these activities that are happening, and we support these activities, and we receive support, of course, from projects such as ESTAF in terms of fiscal incentives and other, activities that we have, and it also helps us to reach out to many stakeholders to hear from them what they really need in terms of support from the ministry. Is the policy enough? What factors should we put to drive policy direction to improve these technologies? And also the issue of the standards. I think my colleague from the Bureau of Standards is also here. But just to mention that under ESTAF, we've also developed standards for solar home systems, which ERB and ZABS have pioneered. So these are some of the activities that we do to improve, the off-grid space. So maybe I can stop there, Doreen.
Thanks, Brian. Moving on to Ministry of Health, we know that currently the ministry is looking at solar electrification of rural health centers. Jason, could you please just elaborate and explain to us what motivated the ministry to embark on solar electrification of rural health centers? You can also share with us some challenges that you've had to deal with. Hi, Jason.
Yeah. Yes, Doreen. Yeah, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
So, to begin with, the health indicators, which are routinely collected by most ministries of health, were showing very high levels of maternal mortality and under 5 mortality. So that's one of the legs that was a push towards us trying to begin to address this problem. Then secondly, it was the health resources. So when we did the first health facility census in 2005, it was clear that the health resources were very limited across the country. So first we embarked on the issue of addressing the issue of the quantities, the number of health facilities available, the number of health personnel, trained health personnel that were in the health facilities, so that we could increase access. And of course, along the way, our focus was to address the issue of equity between the urban and rural, more especially with the urban people being more privileged, accessing a very acceptable level of healthcare and even having options to go to private hospitals. But in the rural setting, this is not the case. So we focused on trying to help the people in the rural areas so that we could then start to bridge this divide between the rural and the urban in terms of the health services that the people were receiving. Then the problems that we're trying to address, like I said, was to try and impact try and reduce the high maternal mortality. Of course, we've come a long way, and seemingly by 2005, still the numbers were quite high. And up to now, the trend is falling, but still it's not acceptable for a woman to die whilst giving birth, because pregnancy is not a disease. So this is unacceptable. And at some point, there was this issue of no woman dying when giving birth. Take it to zero. But yeah, we've been trying and pushing as a country and as a government to do this. The other thing was the under 5 mortality. That was also relatively high. And also they wanted to increase staff retention in the rural areas. So this was overall, in a nutshell, the motivation toward us driving this agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Just a follow up to that. So what are some of the challenges you've had to deal with?
Yeah, the challenges, of course, have been financing. Of course, when we started 2005, the economy was in the peak, but now we're in a trough and our fiscal space is constrained. So most of our programs that we wanted to run and do and achieve have been constrained in some way, and some of them have not achieved like we thought. But our achievements are quite monumental. We benefited from the peak over the 2005 period. Now we're going in a trough, and we're having it's becoming a big challenge for us to implement these programs as government. So private sector also a bit limited size. The small size of the private sector is not helping, because private sector then should come and also then help with the gap that government is facing. But private sector at the moment is growing, yes, but it's still very small in terms of its size and what it can do. So these are also the opportunities which may be challenges that, as we're going to discuss later, that we'll try and look at on how we can leverage these challenges so that we can do something for the communities and the rural communities especially.
Thank you, Jason. We'll come back to you to just then talk about what is the government doing. Would also want to talk about the coordination mechanism. But before I do that, I can see that Brian, you still want to come in?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think the point that Mr. Amrume raised was very important. You know, some of these rural areas, the main reason why there's been a lot of stuff, migration is because of these social amenities which they cannot access. And one of them is electricity. So basically, we are talking about nurses and teachers usually. Yeah, so you find that when you bring these incentives to them, and they are very much willing to pay. So if you bring these incentives to them, you really maintain, the quality standards that you want in terms of education provision and also healthcare provision. So the ministry, having done a lot of these projects, we've seen it for ourselves that these challenges may seem far from us who are connection in towns, but they're very real in rural areas. I just thought to add to that point.
Thanks, Brian. So moving on, we have already discussed that within the off-grid space, there are a couple of players. We have heard from the government what they are doing, and we know there's also private sector and other development partners. But what we also understand is that the coordination is very important. So at this point, I would like to ask Sabera, who is the focal point person for the off-grid task force in Zambia. How does the off-grid mechanism in Zambia work, Sabera? And what are some of your key achievements?
Thank you, Doreen. And once again, hello to all our participants. Maybe just to explain a little bit more in terms of what the Off-Grid Energy Task Force in Zambia really is. You could view it as a product of the Ministry of Energy, as a coordination mechanism which sits under the Ministry of Energy, comprising of representation from government and government agencies, operating partners who are very active in the off-grid space, and private sector association members. So on the off-grid task force, we've got 5 seats for private sector, namely coming from the Solar Industry Association of Zambia, the Zambia Renewable Energy Association. We've also got a cluster for bioenergy. We've got a cluster for mini grids, and then one for finance. So all these stakeholders are brought together to really look at addressing market challenges. Being a nascent market, you would have a lot of challenges with respect to access to finance, with policy and regulatory anomalies, as well as sometimes challenges where there are no regulations. quality standards, I think Brian and some of the speakers have already talked about quality standards. So very important that the government needed to put a coordination mechanism together to understand who's doing what in the marketplace. How does government then support the development of the market, understand the market better? What is their role as the facilitator and enabler of the environment, and also as the key or the primary stakeholder that actually provides correct signals to the investors. So Doreen, in a nutshell, the Off-Grid Energy Task Force is a mechanism that actually then starts addressing some of the barriers and challenges to market growth, but also highlights some of the opportunities, upcoming opportunities for investors as well as developers to take up in the marketplace. As the Off-Grid Task Force, we are very action-oriented, and so we look at what are some of the tangibles, what are some of the actions with respect to market development challenges, and we do this through subcommittees. So, for example, we have a subcommittee on land rights issues, especially for mini-grid players, land rights, I think not just in Zambia, but in the whole SADC region. And a lot of financial institutions have actually said that land rights issues become one of the barriers to investment. We also look at fiscal incentives. So we have a subcommittee on fiscal incentive, and both the Southern African Energy Program as well as ASTAF have been leading quite a lot of work within the fiscal incentive space as part of the market development dynamic. Just to also just mention that fiscal incentive, by and large, on their own, do not provide the mechanism for which developers and private sector can grow their markets in developing nations. I think what's important to understand that as we create these coordination mechanisms, there are a lot of intersection between other incentives. So in addition to fiscal incentives, one needs to also have financial incentives. And this is where mechanisms such as Beyond the Grid Fund, as well as the EU funding through IREP, technical assistance to provide those financial incentives for market players to come on board. So with regards to achievements, I think there are quite a lot from a soft approach perspective as well as tangibles. In 2019, for example, the LEDs were given the tax exemption. So even through the fiscal incentives, although quite a lot of the solar home system components today now are tax exempt, we're still working on inconsistency of tax applications, and hence, as Brian was alluding to earlier on, really also just looking at amending the statutory instruments. We've also looked at unearthing investment opportunities for investors. Today, the market has grown such that a cluster of financial institutions are really looking at what are, yes, we can talk about access to finance as being a barrier, and you could have one or two financing mechanisms, but in terms of the broader sense and being more inclusive, we need to be able to look at different types of financing that are needed by the marketplace. We also look, some of the key achievements have also been in capacity building. And this capacity building, a lot of the times, I think we feel that the capacity, especially from a program perspective, a lot of the times from a programming perspective, we think that capacities are being built at at government level. However, I think capacities get built throughout the marketplace. It's not just about government capacities that have been built, but also private sector. The private sector sometimes have not really understood some of the codes and the laws that government has put up. And so through this coordination mechanism, Doreen, and participants, what we have done is created that critical bridge of communication between the private sector and the public sector. And so I think that has been, those have been some of our major achievements. Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you so much, Sabera, for that comprehensive answer. We'll still get back to you at a later point. I see that the issue of fiscal incentives keeps coming up, so we'll discuss more on that as we go on. But first of all, I'd like to go back to Jason and just ask him what the government is planning to address the health energy challenges that you had earlier outlined, Jason. Hi, Jason. Okay.
I believe he's offline.
Okay, whilst we wait for him, we can move on. I'd like to now talk to Belinda from Zambia Bureau of Standards. And apart from the issue of fiscal incentives, there's also the issue of quality standards. And we know that the Zambia Bureau of Standards is responsible for putting in appropriate standards in the country. So Belinda, what role of quality standards for standalone solar? What is the role of quality standards for standalone solar in promoting government agenda on universal energy access? So what role do you think, what role does quality standards play in promoting the government agenda on universal energy access?
Thank you very much, Doreen. I hope you can hear me as well as see me.
Yes, we can.
So basically, yes. So basically, if we're going to talk about accessibility of energy, even through the standalone solar solutions, these need to be definitely supported by performance, reliability, safety, and fit for purpose aspects. And these are what are spelled in the standards, as an example. So basically, once standards are appropriately applied, they provide this assurance that your standalone solar solution or product is definitely going to be safe, it will perform, it will be reliable, and definitely it will be fit for purpose. And as Zambia Bureau of Standards collaborating, I think this has been alluded to by some of the earlier speakers, we are collaborating with various stakeholders, the Energy Regulation Board, the Ministry of Energy, the private sector. They've been very supportive in actually the development of standards, and definitely through the STAF even program. We have been able to develop standards for standalone solar solutions. And talking about standards in being able to provide protection even with regard to consumers, I think they are able to spell out requirements, specifications to enable a consumer choose the right system for the right place. Standards will be able to provide information on the designing of the system, the operation and maintenance of the system. Some of the aspects or components that have been incorporated or included in the standards that we have actually developed will include product design and manufacture. You're speaking to systems like charging system, lighting system, energy storage system, battery aspects, etc. The aspects of product durability and workmanship as well are actually spelled out in the standard. So basically, with all the components that are included, the specifications, the requirements that are included in the document called the standard, that has actually been agreed upon by a wider range of experts and stakeholders, you find that there is assurance when you are actually buying that standard. And that assurance can come through conformity assessment, through the conducting of tests, as well as certification. And I think much later I should be able to speak to some of the interventions that the program, ESTAF program, is actually providing for the Bureau to be able to actually provide conformity assessment programs to various stakeholders. Thank you, Doreen.
Thanks, Belinda. And I think since you're already on this topic, you can go on and just share with the participants how Zambia Bureau of Standards is working with the Ministry of Energy and also other stakeholders, especially with regards to quality standards.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so basically, we are working with the ministry in the development of standards, like earlier alluded to. The ministry has actually been very supportive with regard to contributing to the development of standards. We are also seen as a partner with in the implementation, in contributing to the implementation of the NEP, the National Energy Policy. And we are definitely, with regard to standardization, definitely, and conformity assessment related matters. And I think, as earlier alluded to also, we are also members of the Off-Grid Task Force. And through this platform for us, we see an opportunity. There's an opportunity for us through our participation on the task force to access information on the standard needs. What are the needs on the market that that stakeholders are bringing on board with regard to standards development and conformity assessment? And also, it provides a platform for us with regard to the implementation of standards. How best can we actually implement the standard? Because we don't want to to develop a standard that will not be used by stakeholders. We develop these standards primarily to be used and to be useful, applicable for stakeholders. So the task force actually offers that platform for us. We access information from there on the implementation of standards. And also, we are able to share as well, I think, information with the rest of the stakeholders with regard to the implementation of standards. And Doreen, I think I would like to take this opportunity to share with the participants and everyone with regard to an opportunity that Zambia Bureau of Standards has now from the program, the ESTAF, with support from International Finance Corporation. We are going to, we have an opportunity to have the Zambia Bureau of Standards laboratory upgraded to enhance the capability to test, to provide surveillance testing for photovoltaic products, as well as solar home system kits that are available, that are commercially available on the market. So through an agreement that Zambia Bureau of Standards is due to sign with the cooperation, we are going to have equipment accessed, and then we are all to be able to provide verification of on the quality of the products. And also through this agreement, we are going to have capacity built for personnel at Zambia Bureau of Standards with regard to the testing aspects for solar home system kits and photovoltaic products. So I think talking about opportunity with the support from the stakeholders, the support from the ministry, actually, it is through the interaction that we've had through ERB, the ministry, that we have been able to actually access such support. We've been identified. Our role and our contribution has been appreciated, and there was that collaboration that was agreed upon to be able to support ZABs in providing testing facilities to stakeholders. Yeah, so basically that is how we are collaborating with the ministry. Doreen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Belinda. So I I would want to just quickly go back to Sabera. I know the issue of tax incentives has been talked about a lot. This, Sabera, you can address this as well as Brian. But Sabera, from the point of view of the off-grid task force, what do you see to be the importance of tax incentives within the off-grid space, and what role has the off-grid task force been playing? And how does that demonstrate the benefits of coordination in the sector? I know it sounds a loaded question, so I hope, would you like me to repeat that question, or you're okay?
No, I think I'll take it bit by bit, Doreen, and you can always come in and remind me if there are certain components that I have not addressed. Thanks very much for that question. I think with regards to tax incentives and the benefits of tax incentives, especially for the private sector, as Brian, I think, alluded to right at the beginning, with respect to tax incentives, the rationale for providing tax incentives to the private sector is such that the end user pricing is then it makes it much more affordable for the end users, and especially in the rural areas. I think as Brian mentioned, I think the jury is out with respect to, has that impact actually been achieved? I think it's also something that needs to be monitored over a longer term period than shorter term. But the tax incentives have also done is they have allowed for private sector that may not have looked at Zambia as a potential market. So in combination between access to finance or availability of finance, such as Beyond the Grid Fund, and tax incentives, you find that the developers from the region, even the East African region, have entered the Zambian market, whereas in 2015, 20, even 2017, they were not seriously and critically looking at the Zambian market. But because of these measures, these incentives, both the tax incentives as well as financial incentives, the market has definitely moved in providing that particular cushion for the private sector to now provide services into deep rural areas. I think the thing to also just mention here, Doreen, and what comes to mind as the off-grid task force, the actions that we had looked at from a market development perspective. How do we grow a nascent market? These are some of the actions that were identified early on with respect to the growth of the market. Tax incentives was an identified an enabler for the private sector to provide services in the rural areas, and for the solar industry to also grow. I think what I'd like to also just say is that in terms of the coordination and how we have worked, the Solar Industry Association has also been key in addressing some of the barriers. There have been time and giving voice to a lot of the private sector entities. There have been times where the tax exemptions at various border posts have been misapplied or have not been consistently applied. And so what that actually meant was that there are times when the private sector has got to provide for liquidity in their companies, just in case at the border post, they have to pay the taxes when in fact some of the items are tax exempt. So these are some of the things incrementally we've been looking at. What are the system difficulties within systems? What are some of the barriers? What do we need to look at from a challenges perspective? And so we've grown that particular market to such an extent that now we've understood that sometimes it's a communication issue between the Zambia Revenue Authority as well as the private sector, and sometimes private sector does not fully understand some of the codes and application and how to actually apply the codes. And this is how, with the help of a staff, developing a customs handbook is very important and very useful, such that the clearing agents, the private sector entities, as well as various different stakeholders really understands what happens at the border post. That's one. The second is also just the identification that as the market grows, as technologies come on stream, different technologies come on stream, different appliances come on stream, there is need for our SIs to be amended. And this is some of the works that even under the fiscal incentive, this is what we're looking at, and A-Staff is helping to develop or amend the statutory instruments so that it's easier for ZRA to create new codes for tax exemptions.
Thanks, Sabera. Brian, would you like to come in and also talk about what the government is doing in clarifying fiscal incentives in the off-grid space?
Sabera, I think, has comprehensively stated that aspect, but perhaps I can mention the importance of fiscal incentives. So it all goes down to the access to electricity. So solar generally is not really affordable to everyone. So because it comes in small packets, I think you have that option. But generally it's viewed as slightly more expensive. So the government's role is to ensure that if our aim is to increase access, then we must ensure from the people who buy, that these products that we want to increase on the market are also not very expensive. So it's this through the incentives. And I think Sabera has explained it very well. All these activities that we are doing to really remove some taxes. Of course, the SIs which talk about removal of taxes have been there for some time, but just to relook at them and add some if necessary, especially now that we are talking about productive use of energy. It's better to add some of the solar products, to that list that have been there for some time, so that we can have products that everyone can access, and after some time perhaps incentives can be removed when the adoption of these solar technologies has reached a certain level where we want.
Thank you so much, Brian. I realize there could be some questions. So if people could please put your questions in the chat. And just before we go to the Q&A, I'd like to just go back to Jason. I hope you are back. And just quickly talk about, could you just explain to us what the government is doing to address the health energy challenges, and what you could also advise other governments who are also trying to address this challenge in Africa?
Thank you, Doreen. So under this solar, the government aims at providing energy to especially the rural ones, which have limited or no electricity. So what we see is first looking for opportunities to finance this program, and then also to look for how to sustain this program. So what we've done is work with other people in the cluster, like energy and other ministries, to look at this challenge. Ministry of Finance, National Planning, So this cluster approach, this integrated planning approach also is helping us a lot because we can leverage the knowledge that energy has and the type of products that may give us a bit more life as we install or recommend, or even ZABs with their standards. They can help us to find the right products that will give us a bit more life for the health facilities. So this is what we're trying to do. And I think the integrated planning approach where everyone pulls for one common cause is a good thing, because with the limited resources where we are here in these resource limited countries, this is very helpful so that we can use the little resources to the best of what they can do for us. Thank you, Doreen.
Thanks, Jason. And I don't know whether you've talked about how you can advise other government officials who would be addressing the same challenges.
Yeah, I think I think partnerships is key. Like we've done with the overseas office, the Commonwealth Overseas Office, and the former DFID, working with different partners to try and address different challenges is very helpful. And then this has brought a lot of leverage and different skills and abilities for different people that we've partnered with. So partnerships is one of the key things. Then locally, working together across sectors. We are the health sector, yes, and our job is not to provide electricity, but we know that electricity is an enabler for us to deliver quality health services. So then we couple up with people who are the experts in this area, Ministry of Energy. We want to integrate with ZABs to help us with the standards, and then also the major planning ministry like Ministry of National Development, and the ones who look at the finance, the Ministry of Finance. So when integrate and work together as one, this is very helpful, I think, than working in sector-specific type of planning. But when we work as clusters, we have more impact. And this is, I think, very helpful for many other African countries to look at.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
So before I leave Zambia to go to Malawi, finally, Brian, to the listeners who are participating in this workshop, what opportunities would you say are there for standalone solar in Zambia as a conclusion?
There are plenty of opportunities currently. Like I mentioned, looking at the connection rates, which are very low, it tells you how many people want to be connected. So we can start from there, first of all. 4.4, of course, it might be higher now because that's a figure we are getting it from a document which was published a few years ago. But really, the whole point is that we have got low connection rates, and there lies in an opportunity for people to exploit. Yeah, so with the increase in mobile money, the payments and so on, I think there is a great opportunity for people to do pay-as-you-go systems, mini grids, and all sorts that we can do in this sector. And having moved around the country a lot, you would see the challenge that people have with access to electricity. Maybe there's a small shop with a small solar home system, and everyone goes there to charge their phone at a fee. So there is an opportunity that people in the off-grid space can exploit to increase access, and not just in rural areas, even here. In urban areas, we all need now a backup system for solar here and there, and it's important that these opportunities are exploited to the advantage of all of us. Because when you have access to electricity, the poverty levels are seen to go down. There's more awareness because you can listen to news, you can do this. So when there's more awareness, there's more other products that you accumulate around yourself, and just life improves. So the opportunities are very, very much there.
Great. So we have all heard about the opportunities in Zambia. Now we move on to Malawi. And Macmillan, could you please just share with us, please tell us about the green loan product, which is offered by FinCorp. How is this different from the pay-as-you-go and ordinary loans?
Okay, so allow me first of all to introduce what FinCorp is, so that at least we are able to follow up very well. FinCorp is one of the few community financial cooperatives in Malawi. We are generally a financial institution. We are not an energy company, but we are a finance company. But somebody would wonder why we are in renewable energy. So in this case, we would say green loan is one of the products that we offer. We offer financial products, and then in that we have to look at the need that our members has, because we operate possibly 70% in the rural, where you agree with me that the rural is highly affected in terms of access to energy. So we looked at that and see the business case. So in this case, we see the renewable energy as a business element, and it brings in a good business case to add that in the product offerings that we have. So it has a number of differences between our normal loans, our normal cash loans that we do, and the green loan. First, we need to know that for financial institutions, it's easy to lend out money. Money, nobody advertise money. Money is self-advertised. And when you come to products like this, it needs you to do a lot of adverts. That's why maybe you will notice that a lot of financial institutions are not involved in this. They would rather sell money and make money faster. So the first difference is that when you're dealing with a green loan, a number of procedures are waived. Like, for example, this is a SAGO, and you are supposed to be a member to access the product. And when you become a member, at least possibly you would wait for 3 months before you start accessing loan products. But for green loan, you join immediately. You can access green loan product. And the other difference is on the interest rates. Green loan is a little bit lower in terms of interest rates compared to the other cash loans. It should be that because we got funding in 2018 from African Enterprise Challenge Fund. And maybe earlier on I was supposed to indicate when we started this. We started actually offering green loans in 2015, but then we saw that with our capacity we would not reach out to so many people. So we had to start looking for some partners. So we partnered with African Enterprise Challenge Fund. So we don't import the products. We partnered also with other solar suppliers. So we have a number of solar suppliers in Malawi, because as a financial institution, we are not allowed to hold stock at a certain level. Our license is to deal with money. So to avoid issues of requiring approval from the registrar, which is central bank, and to bring in this, so we just had to partner with the solar suppliers. So the biggest difference is on the waiting period, the interest rate, the requirements. We do not require a lot of things like securities for this type of a loan, a green loan. We don't require a number of securities. The product itself is part of the security. So that's the critical element that makes it different. And again, for a circle like us, we'll find that maybe we make more money in green loan. That's why we may need to focus much. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. So how can this model be scaled up to other?
Okay, I'm not really too sure how, but first thing I think financial institutions should see a business case. Because first of all, somebody has to see a business case in something. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that financial institutions could easily deal with money because you don't need a lot in terms of advertising, things like those. Everybody knows money and everybody wants money, things like those. So people, financial institutions will not need to go into complicated processes in terms of bringing in who has to get the systems, things like those. So the first thing, if we are to lubricate this, is that financial institutions must see a business case. So that should be in maybe lobbying, things like those, maybe meetings like these, deliberately involving some financial institutions, so that they see if it makes sense to do this. And again, I would also say that our model, the microfinance model, would not be perfect alone. It needs to be an hybrid approach. It should be maybe a combination of a microfinance model and a pay-as-you-go model. Then it can work perfect, because the financial institutions are also very risk-averse. One thing that I usually say is that locally here when we meet, sometimes we're invited in the renewable energy forums. Pay-as-you-go, most of the times, most of the suppliers have seen that as security, maybe an assurance that money is going to come back. It's not always that. There should be a combination of factors for you to be able to grant that loan. So you find that most of the solar suppliers are not specialized in lending. They are not following what has to be done for them to lend and make sure they collect the money back. So the issue here is if we need to replicate that first, we need to ensure that the financial institutions have seen a need for that. They are seeing a business in that, and possibly if there could be some arrangements like what happened with us in ACF, because for us we needed a revolving fund, we needed a capital that we can use to lend. So maybe financial institutions, if they can be able to access some of these kind of fundings that could come in and help again the solar suppliers, because what we are doing is a win-win game between us as a financial institution and the solar suppliers. The solar suppliers need the money fast. We need to grow our own portfolio. So if the solar suppliers need money fast, if we have a pot here of money that we can pay off the solar suppliers, take off the loans, then you find that we have a system that is growing from the side of the solar suppliers, and we also have a system that is growing from the side of the financial institutions. So for me, I feel it's a question of engaging them and possibly making them see what they don't see. Because for me, I will tell you that maybe FinCorp performance, if we compare from 2018, when we started with full force, comparing to the past maybe 3, 4, 5 years to now, you see that FinCorp is performing better now. And one thing that is bringing a lot of income to FinCorp is a green loan product. So it's a business case, but we need to lobby for the financial institutions to see the business case.
Thank you, Macmillan, and thank you to all our panelists. So we have heard from our panelists, and this is now time to hear from our participants. If you've got any questions, I'll ask Victor if there are some questions on the chat. You can just help me with those. There was a question I think this one was being addressed to Brian. What type of energy mix does the ministry envisage when one looks at Zambia? Hello, Brian. Or maybe any of the panelists can take that question.
I didn't get the question, Doreen.
So the question is, what type of energy mix does the ministry envisage when one looks at Zambia? It's really looking at what energy mix is there. Yes.
Okay, so really we want energy from all sources, preferably clean sources of energy. But there are those which are easier to deploy depending on what you want. So in terms of off-grid, of course, it is solar. There are aspects which we are trying to exploit to see if we can put some wind here and there. But I think the most preferred in terms of off-grid systems is solar, because it has its own advantages, perhaps even the cost of installation and transportation and so on. I think it becomes easier. But in terms of the national energy mix that we want all sorts of energy from wherever we can get it, because we saw that the dependence on hydro cost us a power shortage when we had the drought. And you cannot always have certain other sources. If you are getting sources of energy from biomass, you cannot really be stable, because at some point you'll be getting too much of wood fuel and bringing in climate change and so on. So a mix of energy sources is what we want. And here we're talking about hydro, solar, wind, geothermal, and so on. But preferably clean sources of energy.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. There's a question from Mlenga Tsanga. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think I've got a number of questions, but the first one is addressed to Mr. Macmillan, I think from Malawi. I heard his presentation, and he did say that him is completely a financier. I just wanted to find out what has been the default rate in terms of the repayment for the loans that are given out, because I do know that one of the challenges that we have in Africa is about the disposable incomes of the people. So if they have been financing these solar projects, then I would appreciate just to see, probably in Zambia also, if this could be a viable venture. I think that's the first one. Then the other one, I think it's a question, I don't know whether it's the task force for the off-grid or Mr. Brand from the ministry, but he did talk about the opportunities in Zambia for the private sector to be able to enter into the market. But I want to understand that you must first of all address the issues, the challenges that existing for the private sector to take advantage. Because the way I look at electricity, for example, solar, first of all, you must have somebody to put up the infrastructure. So we talk about availability. Is it available in that area? So when you talk about availability, yes, one should be able to put up that infrastructure. But when you put up that infrastructure, there is a component of accessibility. People must be able to access it. So in this case, for electricity, we talk about whether it's solar, but we talk about the ability to be able to connect the people that are in demand for it. And that also calls for affordability. Now, when you look at this process, basically it requires that the government policy is very clear. It's accommodating, which I believe it's not the case at the moment. So that's why I would like to have a comment, because these are the things that may discourage the investors to come into the market. They should think about it as a business, because definitely I will not go and start putting my money if I'm just connecting two people and then that's it. Then I go and put another. Of course, we're talking about standalone, but even if a standalone, I want to be able to connect a number of people, which means there must be some kind of at least the distribution lines in that area. So I'd like to get a feedback from either the the ministry or the task force in terms of what has been done, in terms of ensuring that there is an enabling environment. And as they answer, it would be nice also probably that they talk about the situation in Norway. I'm aware that there are quite a number of standalone, for example, generating stations, but they were able to put incentives that made it possible for individuals or companies to be able to come in as investors, small investors, and they were enabling legislation to enable them to be able to make money by ensuring, for example, that they were able to join to the main grid. Madam Moderator, I submit my question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsanga. And may I request that as we ask our questions, we are brief, but thank you so much for that question. So first of all, Macmillan, we because of the time, I would ask you, each of the speakers, as they are responding, to please respond under a minute so that we can also have others in case there are others who'd like to ask. Macmillan, you can go first, and then we can have either Sabera or Brian come in.
Okay, thank you. Our default rate as of now is in the ranges of 2 to 3%, but that is because of the type of market that we are targeting. We are looking at the employed sector and the VSLs. I don't know. We have village savings and loans in our communities. I don't know if they are also available in other countries. So what happens is when we are lending out, we look at the whole 5 C's of credit. One of which is already tackled by the product is the collateral, which is the same product is a collateral. But then we look at how can we make these people be able to pay back. So from the payroll side, the government has given us the database. So we can check affordability right in the field and give a loan right there. We check affordability using the employment number and upload a deduction right away. And then for the other sector, like the smallholder farmers, people like them, we organize them in groups. Let's take, for example, a group of 10 people, they'll still be borrowing for their businesses, the small scale businesses that they're doing. So let's take, for example, this time around, they're borrowing maybe, let's take $1,000 for the business. So half of it possibly would go to the solar products. So in doing so, their businesses are continuing generating some income that can be used partly to be paid for the systems. Rather than lending out a system and expect, because this system does not mostly generate money that can use to pay back. So we try to capacitate them so that they continue doing business that they can be able to pay back.
Thank you. Brian, minutes.
Yes, I like the innovation that is there from our colleague from Malawi. I think it's just not a way of providing that service and sitting down and expect people to pay. What innovation is there to assist the people, to afford to pay? Yeah, so I think it's similar to what I was talking about in terms of what innovation do companies that are dealing with solar mini grids have. Some would give them TVs, allow them to pay bit by bit, to give them radios or whatever is an incentive that comes just beyond lighting for the solar. So we've seen in Zambia it's also being applied, and it's a good thing. We just want to see some improvement in terms of productive use of these technologies so that they can generate money, like a colleague mentioned.
Sabera, would you like to address some of the questions which was raised by Mulenga Tsanga?
Yeah, thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Mulenga, for your for your question. Rather a loaded question in terms of all the things that a government or even a task force needs to look at. Just to give you an indication, Mulenga, You know, if we just look at Beyond the Grid Fund as a financing mechanism, the past 2 years between 4 companies that were provided with grant financing, they have leveraged a co-financing of $41 million US dollars, created 1,376 jobs, and total beneficiaries to date are 928,413. So as markets grow, you will find that you know, an enabling environment being created by the ministry, by the government, allows for various mechanisms to not only just provide access to financing, but also various other issues. For example, GIZ is also looking at skills development. So as the market grows, what happens? You might need more technicians. And if you run out of technicians, what happens to project developers? So there are a lot of intersections between what an enabling environment is and what needs to be done. We're not saying that, you know, we've addressed all the various challenges, but in creating an enabling environment, we've definitely looked at various needs of the market, of market development. And incrementally, we are finding partners who can come on board and provide those particular services. So like I said, financing through grant financing, catalytic grant financing through the cooperating partners, not just for technical assistance, but actual financing mechanisms, as well as the technical assistance in related fields, whether it's capacity building, or whether it is skills, or whether it is standards, all play their part in providing an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. So I hope I have, Doreen, I hope I have addressed his question.
Yes, thank you, Sabera. And what I would just encourage Mlengatsanga to do, if your question is not answered, please indicate in the chat and the speakers will respond. Unfortunately, I only have time for one question. And Yvonne, I see you'd like to make a quick contribution. Could you just please type it in the chat and the speakers will respond? I've seen Juliet's hand has been up for some time, so I'll take that question. And as she's asking, can I ask Belinda, the speakers? There was a question from James Mlolo in the chat. Do we have any solar standards in Zambia? Are they voluntary or compulsory? So maybe you can just go to the chat and respond to that question. Juliet, you can go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. So I was just thinking about this issue that Brian raised earlier, the issue of, government putting in place incentives to the solar companies out there. But then at the end of the day, the incentives are not really trickling down to the beneficiaries, the customers, so to say. I am of the view that probably it's an issue of less demand for solar products on the market. By less demand, I mean that the uptake for solar products in Zambia is still low. I'm sure it is still low. And so the solar companies that are on the market, they have to fight for that small market that is there. And so at the end of the day, they are in business and they need to make profit. Don't you think that this is probably the reason that the incentives are not trickling down to the beneficiaries, because the solar companies are then forced to raise the prices for whatever products they have, because the flow of customers or clients is low and they need to pay workers. I don't know. I was just thinking in those lines. I don't know what you think. Probably this is something that calls for more sensitization, in the communities. I know that the Zambian government is already doing a lot in terms of sensitization And there are a number of solar companies that are also coming up with incentives to sort of like encourage people to do the uptake on solar products. But isn't it a question of now doing more sensitization so that we can have increased demand for solar products, so that the companies that are providing solar products have clients or ready customers all the time, so that they don't have to raise prices for the little or for the small intake of customers that are there. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that is how I look at it.
Thank you, Juliet. Brian or any of the panelists, would you like to respond to that? I like the chat which is going on. Please continue typing your questions in the chat, and we will ensure, even if it's not answered now, we will ensure that the speakers get back to you and with your responses. Brian or any of the panelists, would you, under 1 minute, please respond to, please, yes, Jason, you wanted to come in?
I think this is why it's key that we, as institutions, government institutions, come in and then increase the market. If we provide solar energy to all these facilities without access to energy or electricity, then we're broadening the market for the private sector to come in and increase the share that the private sector can then benefit from. And apart from that, I think it also depends on the incentives, how we package them. If we go under issues of youth empowerment, skills development, job creation, then we could then package very, very serious and good incentives, which the government would be able to provide, because there's a big benefit direct to the youth in the rural communities or across the country to get some skills. And the blue collar jobs and SMEs are the future for us to move into a middle income country. So I think there is all these opportunities that we see with this work that we're beginning to leverage. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Doris.
We had more time. Hello? Hi, Victor.
Yes, Doreen.
Oh, Brian, you wanted to come in?
Yes. Yeah, just quickly. Yes.
We are just winding up. I was about to hand over to Victor last. You can quickly conclude, and then I can hand back to Victor.
Okay, that was an interesting observation. The reason why there could be a challenge in the incentives trickling down to the consumers. I think it's one of the issues that we really need to look at. Perhaps the market is too small for the solar companies to survive. But really, we need to check and compare and be certain that really they're not trickling down to those. But I think that's one of the most important points to note as we go forward. Perhaps we need to expand more of the market, have the solar system adopted more. If they have more businesses, perhaps they can reduce the prices.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I've been told I can just go on for a bit more. Thank you for that, Victor. So we can still take additional questions. I think, Yvonne, you had wanted to say something.
With regard Lenga Chisanga's earlier question and comments, with regards to financial institutions like the ones being offered in Malawi, Zambia has so far also looked at doing the financial assistance to a number of households, that is from banks like Zanaco Bank, FNB, Stanbic Bank, and with, of course, attractive interest rates that would also, stagger up to about 2 years, a year or 2 years, depending on your agreement with the bank. That is also another initiative that the SME as well as the private sector and government have come up with. I don't know if it seems most people don't know that it's actually going on. And I think he also mentioned something about grid ties, grid tie inverters being introduced. I think in SIAS, we are looking at trying to negotiate that with government, but it will take a bit of time for homes to have grid tie inverters to start feeding back into the grid. It's the Minister of Energy would be able to answer that. I think that's Brian's baby. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. Is there anything I have missed, Victor, from the chat?
There are several, I think they're just comments for now. And some of them have already been responded to by various people. So I think we are okay. If there are any others, we will open it up and share our contacts so that we can receive them directly and direct them to the right people.
Okay, so thank you so much once again to everyone and to our panelists. I can now hand back to Karen to just do our last segment.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, everyone, for a great discussion. I think it was really helpful. To conclude, just from the ASTAF perspective, there are, as a reminder, there are going to be 15-page market updates summarizing the information that you've heard for each of these countries. Those are coming out or imminently. There are one-pagers that Victor is highlighting on the screen. Those are on the website right now. Those are quick snapshots that summarize the slightly longer market updates. Likewise, I think that, and Victor can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you're interested in listening to or getting the information from the West and East Africa workshops that were held in the last few weeks, I think that is probably possible and available. Another thing, Victor posted in the chat a little while ago a survey. We would love to have your feedback about whether this has been helpful, what we could do in future to meet your needs. And thank you for that feedback in advance. And lastly, I want to just say thank you to all of our guests and our speakers. Victor is showing some of the places that you can find out more information. And we look forward to engaging with you on an ongoing basis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. And I take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who attended today's workshop. As is indicated on your screen, please visit our website, www.ai-taf.org. All the documents that you're looking for in terms of knowledge resources for the off-grid sector are found on the standalone solar hub. That is a tab on our website, including the market updates that have been indicated. For those of you who don't follow us as of yet, just make sure you follow ASTAF on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter as well, as we usually share very good updates from us and our partners from those different platforms. From us for today, we say thank you, and we look forward to engaging some more going forward. If you have any further questions, just reach out to any of us. Myself, my email address is, I'll type it on the chat, and let's keep talking, and feel free to reach out to any member of our team for any further information. Thanks again, and have yourselves a good rest of your day and a good weekend up ahead.
Thank you, Victor. Bye.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Very interesting.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashley,